RPN, the Roddenberry Podcast Network.
This episode of Mission Log is brought to you by Blue Apron. Check out this week's menu and get $30 off your first order with free shipping by going to blueapron.com/missionlog.
This episode is also brought to you by the official Star Trek Starships collection. Get the Enterprise D for only $4.95 when you sign up today at st-starships.com/missionlog.
Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast. Episode 270. Past Prologue.
Welcome into Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast. I'm John Champion.
And I'm Ken Ray. Each week on Mission Log, we watch an episode of Star Trek, taking it apart for messages, morals, and meanings, and seeing whether all of it stands the test of time.
This week, Past Prologue, Not a Man Alone.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh?
Not really. Kind of, but not really. I watched A Man Alone in preparation for today's show because Netflix told me that I should.
That is incorrect.
Yes, because Netflix is incorrect.
Correct.
Yeah, they did an order thing. Do you know I actually had to go online and look it up?
Good for you. That's what you should do.
Like a freaking caveman. I was out there saying, wait a minute, what is it? Because, they presented me with a list, and I thought, well, that's got to be right. That was not, in fact, right. John's got trivia coming up in just a bit, but first, a word from Blue Apron, a better way to cook. Blue Apron shops the way you would shop, which means for at least a few meals a week, you can skip the shopping. I say they shop the way that you would because they take great care with the ingredients. The meats are responsibly raised, the seafood is sustainably sourced, and the produce comes from farms that practice regenerative farming. Also, they don't want you to get bored with the food you're getting. In a whole year, they will not repeat a recipe on you, so you won't be eating the same thing week after week after week. Now, while all of that may sound expensive, it's really not. For less than $10 per person per meal, Blue Apron delivers everything you need to make good, home-cooked meals about which you can feel good. Meals like... excuse me, Mr. Champion, are the pipes warmed up?
Oh, I'm ready for this.
Yeah. Okay. Mm-hmm. Meals like pan-fried chicken breast with sweet and tangy zucchini. Italian-style shrimp and sweet peppers over frigola sarda pasta. And Parmesan-crusted steaks with mashed potatoes and broccoli. Now, you and I went out to dinner the other night, John, and you pointed out during our dinner that we were paying to eat out when you had meals from Blue Apron waiting at home. I'm curious, What have you been cooking lately, and what kind of techniques or tricks have you picked up from it?
Well, so we kind of nailed it in the discussion right here at the top, which is to say that you will find yourself cooking with things that you didn't expect and not cooking the same things over and over again. So one dish that I really enjoyed recently was a Middle Eastern baked chicken and rice, and it is spiced with Ras El Hanout, which as soon as I posted a picture of that, my friend Ian said, every time I see that, I think of Ra's al Ghul. And I was like, no, this is definitely not a Batman villain, but it is a delicious spice. But it opened up the possibilities for me that this is something that I could do again, because, of course, I kept that recipe card, so I can do it again.
And plus now you know about that thing that you thought was a Batman villain, but turned out to be something that you can apply to other stuff that you cook going forward.
Exactly. Yeah.
So here's what you do. Check out this week's menu and get $30 off your first order with free shipping by going to blueapron.com/missionlog. You will love how good it feels and tastes to create incredible home-cooked meals with Blue Apron, so don't wait. That's blueapron.com/missionlog.
Blue Apron, a better way to cook. And a huge thanks to Blue Apron for sponsoring this week's show.
John's got trivia coming up in just a moment, but first I'm going to let you know how to get in touch with us. Mission Log Pod is the address to find us on Facebook, Skype, and Twitter. If you'd like to leave us a voicemail, we would love to hear your voice. 323-522-5641 is the phone number to call. 323-522-5641. Our email address is missionlog@roddenberry.com. Our show website, including discovered documents, is at missionlogpodcast.com. And please do remember, we may use your comments on an upcoming episode of Mission Log. And with that, we turn it over to the Trivia King. Only the second time doing trivia for Deep Space Nine. I'm looking forward to seeing who our cast trading card is for this week. Let's find out together, shall we, as John Champion presents trivia.
All right, today's episode, Past Prologue, was written by Catherine Powers. Lots of TV writing under her belt, including Fantasy Island, Airwolf, Stargate SG-1, and Kung Fu. She also wrote an episode of Logan's Run, which is how she met DC Fontana. Now, Ken, you may not recognize the name just right off the bat, but we have talked about Catherine Powers before, a long time ago. She wrote an episode of Next Gen, think way back to season 1, Code of Honor.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not her fault, though. It was the director.
Mm-hmm. All right. Now, the draft of her story had one element that we're definitely missing in this episode, which is that Kira and Tana would have been lovers. But Michael Piller felt like that was a little too cliche, and he wanted to remove that from the story. Now, there's an element that she did not write that was added by Peter Allen Fields. Now, Peter Allen Fields has producer and writer credits on DS9, but I wanted to point him out for a very good reason, which is that he created the role of Garak. And there's an interesting tie-in to another property that he worked on. Ken, I may have mentioned on this show once or twice before that I'm a fan of the old 1960s spy show, The Man from U.N.C.L.E. Well, Peter Allen Fields wrote many episodes of that show. One of the conceits of that show was that the secret entrance to U.N.C.L.E. headquarters was through a tailor shop. So it was the tailor who knew all the comings and goings of the spies going into U.N.C.L.E. So he injected a little bit of that into Deep Space Nine, and the trivia gets even deeper. I don't know if we'll ever actually see it on screen, but there is a screen grab somewhere of a guide to the shops of the promenade, and there is a Del Floria's tailor shop, which in fact was the name of the tailor shop on The Man from U.N.C.L.E. So a little bit of Peter Allen Fields tribute throughout Deep Space Nine. Now, this episode is written by Vienric Colby, and this is his first of many contributions to DS9. He directed a number of TNG episodes going back to Where Silence Has Lease and Pen Pals, all the way up to the finale, which he directed, All Good Things. Hey, you mentioned it in the intro, Past Prologue, not A Man Alone. It's true, A Man Alone was the second episode produced, but it was aired third. Past Prologue was produced third, but aired early. For those of you who are listening to Mission Log, maybe fresh, we decided way back in the TOS days to stick with air date order. Some places like Netflix show it in production order in this case, but pretty much everywhere else it will be in air date order. That was really important with TOS, where they were just all over the map, particularly in that first season. Hey, the title to this show might sound familiar. There is a very similarly titled episode from the first season of Star Trek Discovery, What's Past as Prologue. It's a line from Shakespeare's The Tempest, and it's pretty well spelled out that everything that has already happened has led up to and informed the point where we are now. In the play The Tempest, Antonio says it to Sebastian right before, murder. It all led up to that moment. Hey, I don't know if you noticed that we got a comment from a listener, Brett Dean, and he wanted to make sure that we both noticed that the Mac OS system font Chicago is prominently displayed on Odo's display in this episode. But it is a good point because we are seeing a lot more practical and animated displays in this series than we ever did on Next Gen. So you think about that few years gap between the start of Next Gen and then the start of Deep Space Nine. Well, when they started TNG, they had all these static panels, and they would go in later and maybe animate or composite a thing on top of it. But when they built all these brand new sets for Deep Space Nine, you had a nice big budget to do so, they could pre-plan to have these animated displays in place. And And at the time, sure, you throw a computer monitor in there and use what was, at the time, the Mac OS system font, Chicago. All right, Ken, so you know I like my ship names, and this episode gives us 2 runabout names. We have the Yangtze Kiang. Now, the Yangtze, as we know, is a river in China, and specifically the Changyang, or in Old Chinese, the Kiang, Yangtze Kiang, means long river, and that is a stretch of the Yangtze. And of course, the Ganges River is the famous long river flowing along the border of India and Bangladesh. All right, Ken, you were excited about our trading card of the week. So this week we will focus on Nana Visitor, who plays Major Kira. Nana was born in New York and has a lot of performers in her family. Most notably, her aunt is Sid Charisse, longtime dance star of stage and screen, and her parents were also in dance, choreographers and ballet dance instructors. Now, Nana started acting while in school, primarily in theater. She appeared in My One and Only, she starred in Gypsy, and then notably during production of Deep Space Nine, starred in Chicago as Roxy Hart. But TV roles showed up very quickly in her acting career as well. Soap operas led to guest spots on shows like Remington Steele, Twilight Zone in the 80s, LA Law, and she's still going strong. And yes, at one point, many of our listeners may know that she was married to a co-star. She married Alexander Siddig in 1997. That lasted a few years, and she is currently, as of this recording, married to actor Matthew Rimmer. Now let's talk about guest stars. Barbara March and Gwyneth Walsh as Lursa and Bajor, the Duras sisters. We met them way back in Next Gen, and you may remember their story will come to an end in a showdown with the Enterprise D in the movie Generations. Sorry to confuse anybody with that, but yes, we are sort of going back in time for this episode. Ken, you mentioned it to me at that very dinner, but wait, they're dead.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Or are they?
Or are they?
Well, yes, but not yet. But yes.
This is the only appearance of these two that we get on Deep Space Nine. But yes, their story does carry on. The thing that I like about this episode and the way that these shows are produced there, we got all the information we need about the Duras sisters contained in this show. It doesn't rely on you having seen Next Gen, and it certainly doesn't hurt if you've already seen what happens to them in Generations. We also have Susan Bay here as Admiral Rollman. Very interesting Star Trek connection. She's Leonard Nimoy's wife. Now, they married in 1989, and she was with him until he passed away in 2015, and she will be back one more time in Deep Space Nine. We have Vaughn Armstrong as Gul Dinar. We've mentioned Vaughn before. He was a Klingon in Heart of Glory on Next Gen, and that's what kicked off a long association with Star Trek. He appears in Next Gen, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, and Enterprise, and plays a full 8 different species and 11 different characters. He even appears in video games and in the ride film for Star Trek The Experience. Jeffrey Nordling as Tanalos, quite a prolific TV and film career for Jeffrey, in addition to guest roles on shows like Beauty and the Beast, the one from the 80s, and Alien Nation. He had many recurring stints on shows like Melrose Place, 24, and Desperate Housewives. This is his only Trek credit. And finally, we meet Andrew Robinson as Plain Simple Garak. Another actor with a heavy theater background. Andrew started in TV in the late 60s and racked up a number of small roles. Recurring jobs in soap operas appeared, and then a recurring role on Barnaby Jones. We will see a lot more of Garak. Andrew only plays Garak in his multiple appearances, and even turns up in the video game Deep Space Nine: The Fallen.
Of all the gin joints in all the towns in all the worlds, Tanalos. Head to walk into Kira's.
Prologue. Dr. Bashir is enjoying a cup of tea in the Replimat when he's joined by a tailor, Garak, who happens to be the only Cardassian left on Deep Space Nine. Seems friendly, almost too much so, and Bashir blurts out that the word is he may be a spy. Unfazed, Garak invites the doctor to come by his shop anytime. Sharing his weird exchange with the rest of the command crew, the others basically tell Bashir to chill out. The guy's probably not a spy, but whatever, be careful. And no time to talk about that anymore. Here comes a Bajoran scout ship being fired upon by a Cardassian in pursuit. The pilot of the Bajoran craft is beamed out by Chief O'Brien just before his ship explodes, and the man introduces himself as Tana Los. He wants asylum, and he knows Kira. Act 1. Tana Los isn't just any Bajoran. He's a terrorist, according to the Cardassians, part of a faction called the Kon Ma, and they would like him back, please, thank you very much. Sisko says not so fast. He hasn't decided yet about granting asylum. He might not. Tana's been beat up pretty bad. He's being cared for by Dr. Bashir, but before Sisko checks in on him, he wants some details from Kira. Yeah, he's Kon Ma, and yeah, they've done some pretty bad things even now that the war is over, but it was mostly justifiable, plus he's Bajoran, and think about the future of Bajor. Unimpressed, Sisko reminds her that she is under his command now, and she needs to decide where her loyalties are. Kira is so worked up about this, so determined that Sisko should grant asylum, that she surreptitiously calls a Starfleet admiral to air her complaint. Admiral Rollman says she'll keep an eye on it. The Cardassians that were in pursuit have docked at DS9, but everyone is dragging their feet to make sure it takes a long time for them to actually come on board for a visit. Just the time Sisko needs to learn more about the Kon Ma and also take an irritated call from Admiral Rollman that she does not want any more calls from people under his command. Kira visits Tana, and he chides her a little for working under a Starfleet officer. She promises she won't let Sisko hand him over to the Cardassians. Her loyalty is to him. Finally, Gul Dinar from that Cardassian ship is allowed onto DS9 and immediately confronts Sisko about the unnecessary wait and the matter of handing over the terrorist Tana Los. Sisko says he'll grant temporary asylum to Tana, if only because handing him over to the Cardassians now would be a death sentence, and that would undermine the attempts to regain peace and rebuild Bajor. He'll eventually wind up on Bajor, and if the Cardassians decide to pursue that with the provisional government, then that's what they'll have to do. Act 2. Kira levels with Tana. You're no longer part of that group, the Kon Ma, right? Because the provisional government of Bajor can probably get you and some of the others back home helping to rebuild. Tana says, oh, sure. Then he levels with Kira. You're answering to the Federation now. That's not the Kira he knows. He doesn't need a Federation or a wormhole or a provisional government. He needs Bajorans doing the work themselves. A couple more unexpected guests arrive at DS9. Say hello to our old friends, the Duras sisters, Lursa and Bajor. In the evening, they're hanging out in the bar, and so is everyone else. Garrick indicates rather broadly that Dr. Bashir should keep an eye on them. In walks Tana, and Odo doesn't miss a beat, keeping an eye on everybody. When the Duras sisters leave the bar with Tana, they harangue and threaten him about some kind of payment he was supposed to bring them. Fortunately for us, Odo was witness to the conversation while in the form of a rat. Literally. Act 3. Kira reports to Sisko that at least 2 more of the Kon Ma will follow Tana, and at least a couple of Bajoran ministers are willing to vote for amnesty. Great. And Sisko tells Kira to never go above his head again by contacting Admiral Rollman. Odo reports to Sisko that Tana and the Klingons are up to something, though he's not sure what. They'll keep it quiet for now until they know more. Someone who is in a position to know more is Garrick. At least Lursa and Bajor visit him and indicate that they would sell Tana to him for a bit of gold-pressed latinum from the Cardassians, as long as the price is right. Kira tells Tana the good news. She's got all the votes locked down that he needs for amnesty, but he doesn't seem too happy about it. He is Kon Ma, after all, and she's just a political go-between for the Federation. Well, that really hurt. Kira insists she's like him. She doesn't want the Federation pulling the strings either. Okay, Tana says, in that case, she can help him get a small ship for one last non-violent mission that will wrap things up. Kira says she could just tell Sisko that's what he's planning, but Tana says if she does, then, well, he knows where her loyalties really lie. Act 4. Plain, simple Garak, being in the know and everything, brings to his friend Dr. Bashir's attention that there are now 2 known Khon-Ma terrorists on board DS9 meeting with Tana. If the doctor wants a little more information, it might be in his interest to drop by the tailor shop at exactly 20:55 hours tonight. Exactly 20:55 hours. Naturally, Bashir runs right up to Sisko about this odd exchange, and Sisko says, yeah, you could use a new suit. Go to Garak's tonight and find out what's going on. Troubled by everything, Kira visits her closest ally, Odo. She's deeply conflicted. If she tells Sisko that Tana is up to something, she's betraying her comrades and her past. If she doesn't tell Sisko, she's betraying her commander. Odo presses her, gently, to do a little soul-searching. Her time with the Khon-Ma, is that who she really is now? Before she can give her own answer, Odo calls Sisko that someone would like to talk to him. Running a little late, Bashir stops into Garak's, is quickly ushered into a changing room, and told to keep very quiet. Who should show up next but the Duras sisters, of course. Garak gets the skinny on what they're up to, delivering Belitrium to Tana Los on the dark side of Bajor 8's moon, at which point the Cardassians can have him. Garak plays along that his buyers will pick him up after they've completed their business with him. Isn't that convenient? Now Bashir knows what they're up to, but what's Belitrium? It's the substance that, when coupled with an antimatter converter, can make a bomb. A big bomb. Act 5. With just a thread of information to go on, Sisko and his crew try to determine the best plan of action. Kira insists that the only way to get to the bottom of this is if she accompanies Tana Los on his run. It'll avoid suspicion, and she'll get the full story. Meanwhile, Sisko and O'Brien will hide in a runabout also near that moon and stay in touch with Dax. Just like it's supposed to go down, Tana and Kira arrive in their runabout, and the Klingon bird of prey decloaks. Lursa and Bajor beam over with the goods, and he pays them off. The Klingons split, Sisko prepares to move in, and of course, a Cardassian warship shows up immediately. When Tana sees what's going on, he's ready to split too, but Kira tries to stop him. He knows now she's not here to help and demands, at phaser point, that she pilot them back to DS9. Otherwise, he'll detonate the weapon where they are, destroying the colonies on Bajor 8. Kira reluctantly sets a course, and Sisko follows. When he calls the other ship to demand that they stop, Tana, speaking for the Khon-Ma, says he'll detonate the weapon if they fire upon him. Thinking quickly, Sisko calls on the Cardassians, who are too far away to do anything about it, so he sees his only option is to be ready to shoot them out of the sky. Aboard their runabout, Tana tells Kira to adjust their course to bring them just in front of the wormhole. He's actually going to detonate the weapon there, seal up access to the wormhole, which means the Federation, the Cardassians will all lose interest. Bajor will just be for Bajorans again. Also thinking quickly, Kira jerks their ship around just enough to make Tana lose his balance, and she pilots them through the wormhole. Somewhere on the other side, he ejects the weapon. It explodes, damaging nothing he intended, at least, in the process. Following shortly are Sisko and O'Brien with an ultimatum. Either Tana can surrender now, or he can wait for the Cardassians. Wisely, Tana takes the former. Back on DS9 and with Tana in custody, Kira tells him she had to do this, that the world is different now. He, being the understanding type that he is, snarls that she's a traitor. Walking away with Kira, though, is Commander Sisko. They don't say anything to each other, but they seem to walk in step for now. The end.
You know, watching them walk away like that, I can't help but thinking, this could be the start of a beautiful friendship.
I thought you might say that.
Yeah. Deep Space Nine, the show, is no Casablanca, the film, right? But Deep Space Nine, the station, is Rick's Cafe American.
Yeah.
And for years, and we've talked before about neither you nor I are overly familiar with Deep Space Nine. I've always heard people say, well, how can it be any good? They just sit there. Well, first of all, they have runabouts. And second, there is a wormhole. But third, they are now at this surprise crossroads for galactic travel. It was just sort of like a dusty outpost, kind of a beaten up dusty outpost. Anything good from which had already been taken by the Cardassians, or so they thought. Suddenly they're at the crossroads of everything. I don't really understand people who hate this show, at least the premise of this show, because the premise is, they are right. They're now in the middle of the action.
Yeah. And for any of our listeners who have not seen Casablanca, please,
it's okay.
It's only one of the greatest movies ever made. Truly the height of everything that was good about the studio system firing on all cylinders.
It was a great movie. Yes.
It is.
Yes. And it's one of those movies, honestly, not that this is the Casablanca podcast, because I'm pretty sure there are 800 of those already. It's one of those movies that you hear about it and you think to yourself, it can't possibly be that good. Right?
It's better.
Yeah. So The Godfather, Casablanca, Citizen Kane, like those three movies, each of those movies I went into thinking this cannot possibly be as good as people say. Each one is either exactly as good as people say or better, as John says. But anyway, So I don't understand the people. Well, yes, I got very much a Rick's Cafe feel off Deep Space Nine in this episode.
Yeah, it's where all the scoundrels and the misfits end up, and it's political intrigue, and it's just great. So let's talk about the person we meet right at the beginning, Garak. There's about 15 levels being played in that one simple scene. We set up his profession, the politics, the suspicion. He's a little bit sinister, a little bit sleazy, a little bit overbearing. I'd even say a little bit seductive. There's just so much going on, and that all happens in about 3 minutes.
And you got to figure that there's a little bit going on before that, because he's cultivating a relationship with the one guy that he knows is not going to sit and wonder quietly, I wonder what's going on there. He's immediately going to go run and tell. Or, well, I guess it's a question, actually. Did Garak know that Bashir would run and tell immediately? I mean, was he playing Bashir from the very beginning? Is he basically cultivating a contact or an asset, I suppose?
That's kind of how I read it.
Okay.
Because Bashir is so wide-eyed about this whole thing,
right,
that he just seems like the obvious target. If Garak's going to go to anybody, he's not going to go to Kira. He's not going to go to Dax. He's not going to go to Cisco. He's going to go to Bashir. Yeah. And Bashir just eats it up. Oh, it's just so good. And I don't know if this scene is just sort of that perfect combination of writer, actor, director, what really drove all the choices that were made in that scene. But man, is it good. What a way to start this episode. I'm glad that we'll be seeing a lot more of Garak. That scene, this is the first that we've heard of a replimat, and I love it. Because, the Automat, I'm sure you've heard of, was in New York. I think it opened in the 30s. And this seems like a good way to make use of resources on Deep Space Nine rather than having replicators all over the place. I mean, on the Enterprise, you had a replicator in everybody's room. You had that replicator shop you could go into and make wedding gifts if you wanted to, in case the one in your room wasn't big enough.
I don't think we've heard yet. Was Deep Space Nine, so the Cardassians built Deep Space Nine, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. Was it a military outpost? Is that what it was built for?
I think we have to assume that anything the Cardassians build is pretty much a military outpost.
Well, then it makes sense that they would have a replimat, because it would be akin to a mess hall. Mm-hmm. You can't let soldiers have hot plates next to their bunk everywhere they are, right?
No, can't do that.
So one central dining location actually makes perfect sense, even though we were already in a time where everybody could have had a replicator.
Right. Well, it saves on resources. You still have a certain amount of energy you can produce in order to run the replicators. So I get it. By the way, there's a nice camera shot near the opening of this show was Sisko arguing with Kira. They shot through a lot of people walking in the foreground. And I can't think that we've ever had a shot like that on Next Gen. And it really adds life to the set. You know, you and I would joke that on Next Gen, there's literally about 11 people on the Enterprise,
right?
You know, on any given week. And it really changed when we got to the movies because you could fill in those corridors with a lot of extras you just couldn't afford on the TV budget. This was a really nice use of showing depth and showing action on set, even just during a talking scene. It's very cool. There's kind of a funny line when Kira is showing Tana around and takes him into his quarters. She goes, "So how long since you've slept in a comfortable bed?" Well, too bad because we don't have any here either. That's no like kidding. Literally just a piece of particle board and the thinnest possible,
like 6 pillows, maybe, just like, but like really thin pillows, like pillows that like somebody's been sitting on for decades.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And Tana's like, I can get used to this. It's like, well, good, because it's pretty much like sleeping on rocks, which I'm guessing is what you've been doing for a while. Speaking of interesting conversations, fantastic part between Odo and the Duras sisters, because they show up and they're toting weapons because they're Klingons, and they're not allowed to have weapons on the promenade or anywhere on Deep Space Nine actually. And Odo says, "You have a choice: give up your weapons or leave now." And one of them says, "Who are you?" And he says, "I'm the one giving you the choice."
I love that so much.
It's so cool, right? He's like Old West law dude right there. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's pretty much exactly what he is. Again, not to do the whole frontier thing that Bashir did, but I mean, that's what he is. He's not Liberty Valance, because Liberty Valance was a bad guy. He's the sheriff.
Right.
Not to be confused with She's the Sheriff, which is a podcast we're never going to do. Runner-up line of the show, by the way. Bashir is talking to Garak, and Garak, wants him to do something. And Bashir says, "Garak, I'm a doctor, not..." And I love the fact that they didn't even let him finish the line. And it's just like, clever. Very well done.
Not to fault Tana's logic, but how is detonating a bomb supposed to close an opening that is not exactly there?
We will dive deep into the heart of a man alone in a moment. Wait, what? But first, a word from Eagle Moss and the official Star Trek Starships collection.
That's right. You know what we're talking about. It's the classic collection of teeny tiny starships. The ones that are perfect for building your own fleet. You could put them on a desk, you could put them on a shelf next to the TV, or maybe just whoosh them around the living room when nobody's looking. They are officially authorized by CBS Studios. The official Star Trek Starships collection is available only from Eagle Moss Collections. This is the ultimate collection of vessels from across the Star Trek universe, from the original series to Deep Space Nine, all the way to Star Trek Beyond and beyond.
Each model is cast in a specially formulated metallic resin and hand-painted with reference to the actual CG models used in production, and where they exist, photos of the original studio models as well. Each ship also comes with a display base, plus a collector's magazine featuring behind-the-scenes info, original design sketches, and a breakdown of the technology on board.
So subscribe to the collection today to receive your first ship, the USS Enterprise NCC 1701D, for only $4.95 with free shipping. Additional models, and remember guys, there's over 100 of them, will then ship twice monthly and are delivered directly to your door.
Now, as a subscriber, you're also entitled to free gifts worth over $90, and you can cancel your subscription at any time. Full details can be found at st-starships.com/mission log. Now, if you don't want to subscribe, but you want to buy your favorite ships individually, like the Bajoran Solar Sailor, the Cardassian Galore class, or Deep Space Nine itself, you can do that. It's going to cost you a tiny bit more. Either online, you can do that at shop.eaglemoss.com, or you can hit up your local comic shop. But again, to subscribe, to get your whole collection building itself, It is st-starships.com/mission log. And a huge thanks to Eagle Moss for sponsoring this week's show.
Now, Ken, last week I talked about how in Emissary, to me, a big theme was consequence. And in this week's episode, I would say that trust would be at least one of the themes explored front and center, and from so many different angles. Bashir has to decide if he will trust Garak. And I guess, as you pointed out early, we're trying to figure out exactly where Garak's trust may lie, because, well, he's trusting that Bashir is going to do the right thing for the right outcome here. Kira trusts Tanalos, but should she? Well, we find out no. Kira also has to decide if she trusts her gut. And nobody trusts the Duras sisters.
Well, they do trust each other.
Oh, they do. They
got that going for them. You left out Kira trusting Sisko.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Because she does come to trust him part of the way through. Initially, she's like, bad-mouthing him to Tana, saying that they're oil and water. And then by the middle of it, she actually does thank him. And that's the point at which he says, yeah, well, why don't you bring that up with the Admiral next time you talk to her? Go over my head again, and I'll have yours on a platter, I believe was what he said.
He did.
Honestly, that to me was a great, crazy as it sounds, great trust-building moment. Because she may be walking around thinking that she's some kind of Garak. That she's like pulled it over on Sisko, right? And for her to find out that he's gone ahead and done what he thought was the right thing, even though she has crossed him, or, you could argue that she's crossed him by going over his head.
Yeah.
I mean, she learns a lot about him at that point. He is actually going to do what he considers right. He's not going to be driven by petty, oh, you went over my head, I'm going to make this twice as difficult for you. It's weird because he is definitely telling her, I could take you down so hard. But I'm going to go ahead and do what's right. And that might be as I say, a trust building moment for them as well.
Yeah. And there's a line that Sisko says to Gul Dunar: in war, both sides commit atrocities, referring to the Cardassians and the Bajorans, and in particular the Kon Ma of the Bajorans. You think Picard would say this? Now, both sides could mean us too. I mean, in this episode, like I said, they're referring specifically to Cardassians and Bajorans, but Sisko's pretty matter-of-fact about that, as it's just sort of a given. Now, it may simply be a way to put off Gul Dunar for a moment, even if it is just a moment, but I really wondered if that's something we would have heard out of any other Star Trek lead up until this point.
Well, Gul Dunar is hardly a Star Trek lead, though, right?
No. Hearing from a Star Trek lead, hearing that from Sisko, saying, in war, both sides commit atrocities.
Yeah, I don't know. Here's the thing. We never would have heard that from TV Picard. And I really don't think we would have heard it from movie Picard either, although we do see it from movie Picard. In First Contact, when he's digging around in whatever ensign that was of his, trying to find the piece that will help him know what the Borg are up to.
Yeah.
And Lily's standing there absolutely horrified because, that was one of his people, and Picard can't even see it.
Right.
I think Picard would have to acknowledge that in war, both sides commit atrocities, but I don't think he would say it like it's a fact of life or it's matter of fact. I think he might say in war, both sides commit atrocities, but we must always fight to not do that. We must always, do our best to make sure that doesn't happen. It's quite, as you say, though, it's quite possible that Sisko's just trying to wave Dunar off, as if to say, oh yeah, your hands are clean, please. You guys were both doing what you were both doing. I don't know. I mean, it's something that we've talked about on the show before. It's something we talked about too. And this is so jumping the timeline, it's insane. But I mean, when you talk about when a lot of people have talked about what's going on with Discovery at this point, and we're telling a war story, and so everybody says, well, it's got to be darker because it's war. Well, the question, of course, is why are you telling that war story at that point? Why not just tell a more enlightened story anyway? I don't think anybody would deny that that in war both sides commit atrocities. It's not a justification, though. I think it's an acknowledgement. I think it's true. and it's horrible, and I think it's the reason that we try to avoid it. So would you hear Picard say it? He's an honest man. I don't think he would use it as a justification. I think it's something that would, but I do think it's something that would or may have to be acknowledged, and I think he would do that. Yeah,
I have to agree. There's another theme here that I've found interesting. That is the inability to adapt, the inability to see idic, for a lack of a better phrase to stick in there, while being stuck in old ways. So Tana and the rest of the Khon Ma were trained for war but can't adapt to peace. And while I'm at it, you jump the timeline, so I'll jump the timeline here.
Hey, we don't jump the timeline on this show.
Except when we announce that we're jumping the timeline.
That's true, yeah.
That's true, yeah. But that's a discussion that we'll have, and we have had privately when we talk about Star Trek Beyond. That was a character who could not adapt to the idea of peace. Also, Tana's deluded by the idea that one last act will solve all of his and Bajor's problems. Nothing works like that. So I believe he's certainly blinded by his own ideology, and he's also a manipulative jerk. But that's just on top of everything else. But Kira has so many good lines in this episode, and one of them that draws the distinction between where she is now and where he is now. She says, "It's so much easier when I knew who the enemy was." That's something that she says to Odo in her moment of self-reflection. And Tana is precisely stuck in that place where he has decided who the enemy is and decided that, well, it's only the right action. It's only the right thing that I need to do. That'll fix it. As opposed to being to step far, far, far away from that and realize that the landscape has changed. The approach might need to change as well, that there is actually a future where there can be winners without somebody else being a loser.
Can you go ahead and play it out for me for just a second, though? I mean, you say there's not one thing that's going to make this happen, or that's going to make everything the way that Tana Los wants it to be. The only thing, well, I guess we don't, I wish we'd had a little bit more time without knowing there was a wormhole there. I would actually like to have seen maybe the provisional government and the Federation work together a bit more before the wormhole. Because then you could have the Cardassians come back, and that, introduces a whole new thing. We basically get an hour of the Federation coming there trying to help the Bajorans before we find out about the wormhole. And that's going to make everything, more interesting. That's what's going to turn this into a place where people are actually going to want to be.
Right.
I'm curious, if there were no wormhole, I mean, is Tana right about the isolationism at that point? I mean, would he if he's able to collapse the wormhole, do people just turn around and walk away? Or are they in twice as much trouble now, at least with the Federation and with the provisional government? Because, hey, we finally had something here and you've ruined it. Right? I mean, like, would more thunder have been called down on him by not allowing the traffic? Or would is he right? Would everybody have just been like, yeah, Bajor was good for like a minute.
And then they take off.
And now it's lame. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even if they had collapsed the wormhole, even if the Federation takes off, although I don't think that would happen. I mean, the Federation's interest is in making sure that there is peace in that area, not just necessarily exploiting the benefits of having a wormhole there.
Right. I mean, witness the fact the Federation was there before they knew there was a wormhole.
Well, right. Yeah. So, it seems like no matter what, there is, we're being led to believe that the position and the power of that provisional government is still somewhat tenuous, and there is still the threat of Cardassians taking whatever they want from there. Again, regardless of the wormhole.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, it's weird. Well, yes. There was a weird thing that happened, actually, though, in Emissary, where Picard was like, it almost seemed like Picard is the reason the Federation is there, or that Starfleet is there. Because when he's talking to Sisko, he says, so the Bajorans want to be in the Federation. I've taken an interest in the Bajorans, and so I want you to make this happen. I mean, it's a bit weird, and maybe that's just they're trying to simplify really quickly why is it that this whole thing is happening, right? Mm-hmm. I'm not 100% certain why the Federation is there in the first place. I mean, I do believe that the Bajorans do need them to, stop the whole planet from erupting into civil war, which is basically exactly what Kira said in Emissary. Mm-hmm. At the same time, is it only because we had an Ensign Rowe that we now have Federation involvement here? Because the Cardassians have pretty much depleted Bajor of anything that is useful to them, it seems.
Yeah, but I mean, it seems like, at least in Picard's version of the Federation, once somebody raises their hand and says, hey, we need help and we'd also like to be a part of the Federation, then the Federation takes that seriously and they show up, try to help out and see how that can happen. Yeah. Now, it's not a guarantee. And yes, it doesn't hurt that we had an Ensign Rowe, but Ensign Rowe also indicates that there had been some longer ties to the Federation at some point, even if Bajor was not a member of the Federation. So I get Starfleet's presence there. I get the Federation's presence there. I get their interest, even if there isn't some immediate gain from that. The altruistic nature of the Federation is that they need help. They're coming out of a war. We have the resources to help them stabilize themselves after a war. Even if Kira says, well, the only person who can bring my people together is Kaiopaka.
Yeah.
Even if she says that.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, the other thing that's kind of weird about about all of it is it sounds like the Bajorans would be at the very least split 50-50 on whether or not they actually want Federation involvement. So far, the Bajorans that we've met don't want Federation involvement.
Yeah, right.
And yet there's the Federation. So, I don't know. I will say I was touched and, affected, I think, by the position that Kira is in. I mean, she's still fighting for Bajor. She actually says, I'm still fighting for Bajor in my own way. But, I mean, the way she's doing it is without physical weapons. And what's a drag is, so to somebody else, that particular, brand of patriotism, that particular brand of fighting, the one that doesn't involve, actual fisticuffs, since it doesn't look like someone else's, it can be questioned. Oh, you're not a real Bajoran because, you're not taking up arms. You're actually working with these, other people, which was depressing.
Right.
Like a bummer thing for her to have to deal with. The same kind of thing. I mean, and it gets really warped really quickly when the whole thing with Tana, when he's like, so he's got the bomb now, and if Kira doesn't do what he says, he's going to blow up the bomb and wipe out all the colonies on Bajor 8. Mm-hmm. And she says, you would kill your own people? And he says, the question is, would you kill them by not doing what I say? Okay, well, that's actually you. Yeah. That's actually you doing that. That's not me doing that. It felt, well, we'll probably deal a little bit more with Tana Los in the next segment, but yeah, she was in a really tough spot because, there's still got to be a part of her too that wants to shoot Sisko. Maybe not Sisko personally, but, that wants to get the Federation out of there, that wants to get Starfleet out of there. She wants, I think she actually says she wants Bajor for Bajorans, same as Tana Los, but she's playing a long game and he's playing with guns.
With Tana's plan thwarted, it is time to see what we can take forward. From Past Prologue.
So normally this is the part of the show where we decide about this particular episode, where we decide the messages, morals, and meanings, or what we see as the messages, morals, and meanings of the episode, and decide for ourselves whether the episode stands the test of time. Before we do that, though, there's something I want to get to, and I'm actually going to call back to something that you said earlier, or something you mentioned earlier. Mm-hmm. You mentioned earlier the Season 1 TNG episode, I believe it was Episode 3, Code of Honor.
Oh, Code of Honor.
And you blew my mind in Code of Honor because when you did the recap of Code of Honor, and for people who haven't seen it or don't remember, Code of Honor is quite possibly one of the most racist things on TV in the 1980s. Has to have been, because it just is. Everybody's black, and that's fine, except everybody's also, they're decidedly black. I can't really think of a good way to say it. Except they're really, it just seems very racist. Yeah. And then you, when you did your recap, didn't mention race at all. And if you just hear the story, if you just read what the person who wrote the script or wrote the story wrote, there's nothing racist about it. It's the way it was presented. Mm-hmm. I only bring this up to say, Sisko's black. And I don't know that we have mentioned the fact that Avery Brooks is black, and I don't know that we have mentioned the fact that Deep Space Nine is being commanded by a black guy. Now, he's not a captain, but he is a black person in command on a Star Trek series, and that had never happened before this. We might have seen somebody in command, but he's going to be our lead. He's our leader. He's our Kirk. He's our Picard. He has other captains that may come down the road, or other leaders that may come down the road. And they hired a black dude. And we didn't even talk about that last week because there was so much other stuff to talk about. It really should be acknowledged. This is another example of Star Trek pushing that envelope, pushing that frontier. Bringing us something that should have been happening for years and years and years on TV, but Star Trek finally got around to it, and it's a really neat thing to see.
Yeah, that actually did come up as a question from somebody saying, "Why isn't Sisko a captain?" Well, here's the thing: He's in command. He is the commanding officer of Deep Space Nine. But I think part of what's important about setting up his character from Emissary is that he was a guy on the way out. He did not want to be there, and he's kind of been given this dumpy job way off in the corner where nobody else wants to be. Right? So it sets up a couple of interesting things. Well, one, he's got a place to go. You know, he's got a place to go up, and we get to explore in that episode kind of his conflict about being there in the first place. Yeah. You know, and two, we're not taking anything away from his capability in that position. I look at it this way, you know, had Next Gen been a different show, and had Riker not been, you know, we know we're going to get Riker for all 7 seasons of Next Gen, but had they been maybe a little faster and looser with that cast, you could take a guy like a Commander Riker and stick him over as the head of this alien space station in a war-torn corner of the quadrant, where it's just going to be a mess that he's got to clean up. You know, the
other thing is, I mean, it allows for growth for the character, right? I mean, Benjamin Sisko on the Saratoga was on his way to being captain. Well, we don't know that for certain, but I mean, he was well positioned on a starship, and probably one of the next things for him is going to be captain of his own ship. We don't know because we didn't see much. And then 3 years ago, this terrible thing happened to him, and for the past 3 years, he's been floating. I'm not saying he's just been doing just enough to get by, but he has not been driven in any particular direction. I mean, the real question, I think, is not why is Benjamin Sisko not captain, but why is Commander Sisko being given charge of this space station? Because for the past 3 years, he has existed in one moment, that one moment being the death of his wife. So, I mean, if you want to knock them for saying, oh, sure, they put a black man in charge, but he's not captain, I mean, they put a black man in charge, and that's the real coup here, I think. And who knows? There may be a promotion in Sisko's future. I don't know. I couldn't possibly read ahead. Anyway, so I felt it seemed like that was the thing that we should acknowledge, because there was so much other stuff that we talked about last week. And then you and I later were like, oh yeah, and that thing. Yeah. So now having revisited episode 1. And the fact that both Benjamin Sisko and Avery Brooks are black. Let's talk about this episode of Star Trek Deep Space Nine. This episode, of course, being A Man Alone. No.
Oh, wait a minute.
I know it's not.
Watched the wrong one again.
It's Past Prologue. Does this episode hold up as far as you're concerned, Mr. Champion?
I'll just come right out and say it. I love this episode. I think, first of all, just from a production standpoint, it's well shot, it's well acted, it's tight. It doesn't feel like there are any superfluous scenes. Everything is there for a reason. And it was one of those that I enjoyed watching over and over again because they pack a lot of plot and a lot of detail into that 48 minutes or 50 minutes or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Some of the standouts. I love that scene between Kira and Odo. I love pretty much every scene between Kira and Sisko. And let's compare this one now because we're only 2 into Deep Space Nine. Let's talk a little bit about Emissary because, well, that's our point of comparison now. Emissary was good in its own right, but that one seemed more concerned with setting a tone and having those compelling poetic explorations. And because of that, there are weird pacing issues. Because of that, you're not entirely sure where they're going with everything. This one, by contrast, is just rock solid. And I feel like this is a story that would have worked on Next Gen. It would have worked on TOS as well. And everybody in this is just better. Mm-hmm. So Emissary kind of is its own thing, but you can tell here that they're finding their way. This feels like everyone's been together for a long time, that they're firing on all cylinders. Now, look, Kira's dilemma is pretty obvious. It's pretty bonk bonk on the head for the audience because we know what she's supposed to do. But it works here because Nana Visitor is so good and the story is so well written. Again, that relationship between Sisko and Kira is really developing. It's strong, it's contentious, but it all works. And by the way, since we were talking about Avery Brooks, now, when we were talking about Emissary, I was talking about his performance, leaving me a little cold.
Yes. I believe what you said was it seemed like he was reading the audiobook of Emissary.
Yes, that is precisely what I said.
Yeah.
I don't feel that way about him in this episode at all. I feel like everybody is more relaxed. Everybody is who they are. And there are so many moments that just feel genuine between him and the other people in this cast. So now I don't know what we're in for next week because that was the second episode filmed, A Man Alone. but I'm glad that this is the one that I am seeing second.
Yeah.
Because it seems to have fixed a lot of the problems that I had with Emissary. And I just, thoroughly enjoyed this one from beginning to end.
Yeah, I'm there. I mean, the one thing I will say, I kind of wish I didn't know the trivia. I mean no disrespect to the non-visitor, nor to the character Kira Nerys. But I miss Ro Laren and I miss Michelle Forbes in this episode. And that's just because I know that character, and I know, honestly, Michelle Forbes acting a bit more than I know Nana Visitor's acting as well. Yeah. And I can see her in this. Now, the only thing is, I think I only miss it because I know it was what they wanted. I don't think, if I didn't know that, I don't think I'd be sitting there going, wow, this really needs somebody else. Because she is good. In fact, everyone, not to parrot what you said, everyone really seems on in this episode. Even Bashir. I've heard a lot of people ask us to go easy on Bashir, and I'm not sure why exactly. I mean, he is goofy in this episode, but he's supposed to be goofy in this episode. Everybody is great in this episode, I think. So from a production standpoint, from an acting standpoint, from all of that, I absolutely think it works. So that's the production part of it out of the way. Let's talk, though, about the messages, morals, and meanings part, the M&Ms, as I pretend I like to call them.
So messages, there are themes here, and I think there are messages woven into those themes. Trust but verify. We're kind of there, particularly with Sisko in his interactions with Bashir. He's like, this is probably no big deal. Garrick's is Garrick. Go find out what's going on. is the subtext of all of that. Odo comes to Sisko to say, hey, something's going on. We should just figure out what it is. Okay, don't tell anybody. So we're going to find out what the thing is. So there's a bit of an underlying subterfuge here and a bit of an attempt to keep it on the level, but then doing everything you can to dig to make sure you're getting everything that's on the next level.
Well, yes and no, I will say, and something that we forgot to discuss, but it was actually a fairly powerful moment. I think it was when the Duras sisters showed up and Odo was like, yeah, I can make up a reason to lock him up.
Mm-hmm. And Sisko says no.
And Sisko says no.
Don't do that.
And it's actually really interesting, too, because Odo says, yeah, they it's sort of like what they always say about, well, at least he made the trains run on time, right? I mean, Odo actually says the Cardassians were terrible, but basically but you know what you could get away with. What was it? Their justice may not have been just, but it was sure, or something along those lines. I mean, basically, he's sort of missing the old days when he could just, bust skulls to keep peace. But I mean,
yeah, but what does he do then? Because he doesn't say to Sisko, yeah, you're right, I won't lock him up. I am going to change myself into a rat so I can spy on their private conversations.
Okay. Yes, maybe. Okay, I understand what you're saying, but at the same time, I mean, at the very least, Sisko wasn't like, yeah. Because, I mean, honestly, it might have gone a weird way, right? The Cardassians want to board Deep Space Nine, and Sisko's like, sure, you can do that. Chief, find every reason you can to keep them off the station as long as possible. Mm-hmm. Right? So, I mean, it's possible that Odo could have said, hey, I found these drugs on Lursa and Bator's ship. Right? And then Sisko's like, good, lock them up and make sure you actually put the drugs there before you do. Yeah. I mean, it's good to see our Starfleet be our Starfleet, even in this darker setting. It's good that, Sisko wasn't like, yeah, they are trouble. Find a reason. I mean, he actually stands there and says, yeah, they are trouble. Treat them as fairly as you would if they weren't.
Who was it on Next Gen who said, well, we need to bring that ship into the shuttle bay and just find every reason to keep that ship there and tear it apart and make them wait. I believe that was either Riker or it might have been Deanna Troi. Giving an order.
I thought it was Worf, actually.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
Well, Worf found the reason to do it.
Worf found the reasons,
right.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, which was not a surprising thing for Worf, as I remember.
Yeah. So I think that this story, it's really Kira's story that the moral principle at stake here isn't mutable. It isn't gray because her loyalty might lay on one side or the other. She learns that if her principles are worth defending, that they are worth defending no matter what and no matter whose side she's on. The principle is her honesty, her loyalty, her conscience, and her entire history was there with the Khon-Ma and with Tana, which I do agree with Michael Pillar's decision. It would have messed things up if they had given them a romantic subplot as well. You didn't need that here.
Yeah.
But the principle that she's faced with is that honesty and her dedication to making a better future. So she's going to stick to that. And it's nice to see her go through that journey. She says to Tana as well, we talked about the inflexibility that Tana has. Kira says to Tana, the old ways don't work anymore. Everything is different now. And to her, she's there to work for peace. She's done with working for war. And I guess the other way to say what she says is you gotta embrace the Idic, baby.
All right. I didn't hear her say embrace it. Well, I didn't hear her say embrace the Idic, but I did hear her say embrace change. Let me back up.
But she's living that Idic, though. She's working with Starfleet. She's working with people that she never thought she would work with before. She's tolerating Cardassians to the extent that they can at least be a part of this and not going with what would be Tana's instinct, which is to blow them up. So she sees that the world is different and she's trying to do everything she can to work within that.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think you're just giving her a little bit too much credit when you say that she's embracing Idic. She may at some point. I don't think she is at this point. I mean,
I think she's on her way.
You and Cisco don't get along? Oil and water. That's not Idic.
No, but then they do, because they walk off together. I'm talking about by the end of the episode.
Yeah.
They walk off together into the sunset.
All right.
Yeah.
I think you, well, and I know I did it earlier. It feels like you might be reading ahead. I'm not hearing Idic yet. But, I mean, mostly I think we're on the same page. Well, except I do have to say I also hate your trust but verify thing, because it's not really trust. I mean, it was Soviet era doublespeak, right? Trust, but check. And that's not, not trust.
Yeah, and that's where they are in the episode. I'm not saying it's great. I'm saying that Odo changed himself into a rat, literally a rat, so he could go spy on somebody's conversation.
Yeah.
Even after Cisco said, no, just,
How can he not make a nose, by the way? He can make himself a rat. He can make himself a perfectly passable bag that Cardassians will carry from Deep Space Nine to their ship. Can't make a nose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Weird.
All right. Weird. Don't be afraid to change. I think is definitely one of the messages here. Don't be afraid to reassess. There's an interview, and I may have talked about it on Mission Log before. There was an interview that I heard with an 80-something-year-old man around the time of Brexit. It was on the BBC, and he was crying. And the words he said were something like, "I know I'll be dead, but I just want things the way they were." Dude, okay, fine. This to me is Tanalos, right? Fighting is what he knows. The only way forward for Bajor is the way that he saw years ago. He can't reassess. He hasn't changed his thinking. He won't change his thinking at all. Additionally, maybe be open to the idea that while working differently, somebody else may also be working for good. I mentioned this in the last segment. Kira was a fighter. She's now working with current reality. And this is, I think, why I'm sort of like on the fence about your Idic thing. She's taken another look and realized that there are better ways than militancy to help her people. And I don't think that's, let's bring everybody in. I think it's just, we can just keep firing guns, but eventually somebody with more guns is going to come and we're going to be dead. I mean, she's looking at the situation and saying, okay, this is the reality of what we're doing right now. And, she's not caught in the way that she always thought things would be, or caught in the way that she always thought things should be. And yet she's still working for peace. And I got to say, good for her for not being bullied by, her people and their old ways and the acting against what she feels is right. She's a great character in this episode. She's a strong character in this episode. And yeah, I think the messages in here are just, stellar.
Mission Log is produced by Roddenberry Entertainment. The executive producer, Rod Roddenberry. You can find out more at roddenberry.com. And if you want to see the latest podcast productions from Roddenberry Entertainment, Mission Log Live, Women at Warp, The Trek Files, and Priority One, go to podcast.roddenberry.com. For more exciting Star Trek podcasts, check out Trek FM, that's trek.fm. And for the latest in Star Trek news and discussion, be sure to visit trekmovie.com.
Next week, Past Prologue. A Man Alone.
Some of the music for Mission Log provided by Warp 11, online at warp11.com, and from the album Messages by Key Theory, free to download at kitheory.com. Next week, Past Man Prologue alone, or something. I seriously have no idea anymore. End transmission.
Podcast.roddenberry.com, the Roddenberry Podcast Network.